So the name of the controller is Seed. That's like the model name, okay? Because we make a bunch of different models. You have 2 greenhouse zones. Zone 1 is the large zone, Zone 2 is the smaller zone, and we're going to change those names to what you're going to call them.
Actually, Zone 1 and Zone 2 is fine. I just needed to know which is which.
Oh, okay. No, and it's real easy to change. You could change it today and change it tomorrow too. The reason it's going back and forth from rain and not rain, again, if it's not precipitating continuously and it stops, so it might go back and forth from a sunny day to a rain day. If it were to snow, you'll see that. This is the weather station. Okay, so we have temperature, humidity, light level, and photosynthetic active radiation. And if you read this fun magazine, or you get another one, the real big one, the GPN one, there's always articles about light, and that is plant growth light. So like 300 to 700 is your favorite place to be. So you're still in plant growth. We got wind speed, and then the direction. Precipitation is or it isn't. I don't have a bucket to measure how much, just it is or it isn't. Temperature in the zone by the sensor that's hanging. So your zone's a little bit cooler than the other one. Okay. When they're outlined in blue, they're cooling. When they're outlined in green, they're between heating and cooling. When they're outlined in red, they are heating. And if you have a smart controller at home, it's probably the same. Like a Nest, a Honeywell, any of those guys are the same. So blue is cooling, green is like perfect, red is heating. If I go in the zone, all I have to do is touch the screen to go in the zone. It is going to tell me what my daytime hours are based on latitude and longitude of this physical location. So sunrise, sunset here. The temperature, humidity, vapor pressure deficit, fancy word, we won't go into that yet. The interior light, you actually have a light meter in your zone only, because you have grow lights. And the total light for the day that we accumulated. Right there, that's perfect for lettuce. They like 17. Things like tomato want like 30. Just to give you an idea. All the blue equipment is cooling. Red equipment is heating. Target temperature is where you want to be. And again, I just put some things in today to keep things alive. Grow lights, HAF fans at the bottom, they don't use temperature to operate. They use different things to operate. So they're down there without anything in their bubbles. This tells us where it is right now in its movement, or if it's on or off or in an open position. And then it tells you why it's doing it. Okay. So right now I said I want something between 63 and 72. So we're 74.1, so we have a roof vent is open, pad vent is open, and 2 fans are on. Okay? So the roof vent is only open 25% because it's limited by the exhaust fans. I don't want to suck all that hot air back in. I want it cracked, but I don't want to pull it all back through. So that's why the roof vent is partially open. And if it rains again, it's going to go down to 10%. It'll say limited by rain. Pad vent's 100% open. It can't rain in the pad vent. I mean, literally can't. And then you can see as it would get warmer, we would bring on more equipment. If it were to get cooler, we're going to bring on our heating equipment. And then if we're in between these two, these guys down here are going to come on, these HAF fans. Because that's going to make the airflow mix and keep everything even. Okay? And then what you can't see down there is one more, it's called alarms. You don't have any alarm connected to me right now, but I do have a set of dry contacts. So kind of like a door breach alarm, water in your basement, that sort of stuff. So I have 2 sets of them, and if you want to use them, I can just show you where they are. I can detect fire generators. I can tell you when the power's off. I can tell you when the controller can't talk to its network. I can tell you all these things, but there's no device to tell you that right now. So if you want something like that, either use what the school has, because I see you have a bunch of gear out there. I can hear when the classes change or what have you. Or you get an external alarm device. They can be wireless, they can be wired, they can be from Amazon, they can be from Wadsworth. There's more alarm companies out there than anything else. So we'll go into that, but just so you know it's there. Okay, so Eva, you're going to click on target temperature. And right now, day is highlighted. Day starts at 6:50 because when I use these three little dots over here, it says we have sunrise at 6:50, sunset at 8:32. We're at 13 hours and 42 minutes of daylight. That again is lat long. It is not a solar sensor. It's lat long, so it knows sunrise, sunset. Okay. Night mode, I gave you 62 for heating and 78 for cooling. It's a nice big range. So if you were propagating, you'd probably want that a little bit warmer, you know? I'd bump up my day probably and my night. You know, if you were propagating plants, you might do like during the day, maybe 68, 70, up to 75, 76 for cooling, somewhere in there. And then at night, oh, you'd have to be quite a bit warmer, maybe 68, and again, keep those guys warm, you know, 68, 78, 68, 76, somewhere in there. But you, yeah, heating more than anything when you're propagating, of course, heating more when the sun's not available, yep, all that good stuff. But for the time being, this will be just fine, okay? And if you were not using the greenhouse, don't ever close the greenhouse down, ever. Like for summer, you don't close it down because everything will be like Willy Wonka melted. It cannot get 160, 180 in there unless you want to buy a bunch of new stuff. It's almost as bad as freezing the greenhouse because it will melt a whole ton of things. Now you could widen it way the hell out there. So you could go like, I want my heat down at, 47 and cooling at 80. Shut the curtain, turn that off. Turn the pad pump off, but let the fans run, let the roof vent run, let the pad vent run. But just don't ever let it turn into like a boxed stove, because then you're going to be in trouble. Okay? So very easy to do that.
So if it's overheat, is there an alarm?
If you buy an alarm system, you bet.
No alarm right now.
You got to buy the system. I can give it to you, but there's nothing wired. So there's a bunch of companies out there. There's again, Amazon, I mean, they have little coin cell guys that are half this size that sit on the bench that you put a AAA battery in and it texts you when it gets out of range. Mine is like power loss, the two IOs can't talk to each other, the sensor's not talking to the IO. I mean, I just have a lot more triggers, but you could be like $30 in the hole and buy something cheap just to sit on the bench. It just depends. What do you want to spend? What do you want to do? To be honest with you. Think of like home, like, I'd be really pissed if my freezer went out, A, the mess, and B, losing all the good stuff in it. So you think of it like that. What kind of alarm do you want? How technical? Okay, so we're gonna start with the easy stuff. So down at the bottom, HAF fans, they are really boring. Again, they run when we're not doing things. So when the vents get more than 75% open, they really go off. They're gonna come back on when the vents start to close. And they're going to go off when the exhaust fan comes on, and that's under this little limit. I put that little button exhaust fan. But if you're in there and you're teaching, kids are hot, you're hot, like it was 2 weeks ago, it was like Swamp Thing. Come over here to overrides and just go, hey, for the next 30 minutes, I want them to turn on and hit start. And hit save, and you're going to see, now it's going to say on for 30 minutes. You can turn any of that stuff on. If you turn the exhaust fan on, just make sure vents open first. So you're not negative pressure. But everything has an overhead. Okay? That's it for HAF. There's nothing to it. Grow lights. Did we find out what's going on with grow lights, Jordan?
So they